All right, David, I would like to ask you some questions along another topic that we are getting more and more questions on, and that is around AI regulations and governance. What key developments have you seen in this area just over the last year?
So, regulations at the federal and international level are lagging way, way behind in terms of what is possible today. Now, this is not really a surprise, particularly in America, because we have more of a reactive approach to regulation, whereas the EU has a more proactive approach. And so the EU AI Act, I think it was recently ratified, or it's close to being ratified at this point, has been seen as kind of overly heavy-handed with its definitions in terms of what constitutes high risk AI versus low risk and other thresholds for regulation. But also, one of the key problems from my perspective is, and it's not a problem, it's a good thing to include, but it's too limited, is they focus primarily on consumer protections rather than broader systematic problems, such as broader safety risks. Now, there has been some advancement here, particularly in the private sector, which is focusing on CBRN. So that's chemical, biological, was it radioactive and nuclear? Or that sounds redundant. Anyways, it's a pattern of kind of what are the greatest threats that AI has. If you put a powerful AI in the hands of an adversarial actor, whether it's a hostile nation or a terrorist organization, how can they use it to do harm? It can range from launching cybersecurity attacks, which many models have already been demonstrated to be capable of compromising websites and aiding hackers by writing scripts. And there's even been some evidence of viruses that are AI enabled or AI augmented viruses, cyberspace attacks, aiding with the creation of bioweapons, for instance, understanding and building nuclear weapons, whether it's the bomb itself or rockets and that sort of thing. So those are kind of the biggest risks that the industry has consolidated on. Now, fortunately, pretty much every government and every international organization already has a framework for how do you handle these kinds of threats. Because from bioweapons to cybersecurity to nuclear weapons, these are nothing new. It's just AI is kind of another tool in the toolbox for anyone who wants to do harm with these. So with that respect, I am a little bit more pleased to see the direction that things are going at a federal level. And here's where my thoughts are a little bit more, I don't want to say conspiratorial, but reading between the lines, I think the reason that in particular the American government is kind of slow walking any regulation is because the last thing that they want to do is throw cold water on progress, namely because of geopolitical tension with China. China is full steam ahead on AI. They are still behind us. At the same time, many of the best papers that are published are from Chinese authors. And so there's a lot at stake here on the world stage with respect to artificial intelligence. And as Vladimir Putin said a few years ago, whoever wins the AI race basically wins geopolitics for the next several decades, if not several centuries, or permanently. So the stakes are very high. But from a business perspective, it's all gas, no brakes.
Yeah. I was going to say, David, doesn't it have to be an all or nothing type of thing? That is, how do you envision global cooperation shaping the future of AI regulation, and what challenges might arise in achieving international consensus? Because it does seem to me like it's got to be almost an all or nothing type of scenario.
Yeah. And so our best framework, for instance, on international regulation of something dangerous is nuclear weapons. And of course, we have non-proliferation agreements and those sorts of things. But here's the thing, it's not a one-to-one comparison. When you look at the utilitarian function of nuclear weapons, they are only destructive and only serve as strategic deterrents. And so because of that, they don't really have any other use. You build a nuclear stockpile and then you let it sit, and your ability to launch nuclear weapons means that you're not going to get attacked. Great. It's a one-trick pony, basically. Artificial intelligence is almost the opposite. So far, AI has only been useful. Yes, it's been disruptive, but it's only given us art and music and writing code. It just wants to be useful to us. And so here we have this superpower that has, up to this point, no real downsides, except for a few people out there that are saying, AI is going to kill us all, which it could. I'm not really in that camp, and I've talked to people who are. And yes, it does have the potential to be dangerous, but it's dangerous in the same way that any technology or any science is dangerous. When you invent dynamite, you can blow more things up. When you invent nuclear weapons, you can blow more things up. With artificial intelligence, now the entities that we're building, whether they're robots or agents or automation platforms, they have what I call functional sentience. They can behave more agentically or autonomously, which is an entirely new set of paradigms in terms of how they can behave. And sorry, I kind of took that took that down a rabbit hole. Hope that answered your
No,
question.
it did. Yeah, thank you. So, David, from your perspective, what are the essential elements of effective AI governance that can balance innovation with societal safety?
So on the level of individual corporations, I mean, again, many existing frameworks exist in terms of don't harm your customers, don't harm your consumers, pay your taxes, those sorts of things. Now, and it depends on how much responsibility you want to take from a governance perspective. I've talked to a lot of people who want to kind of tap the brakes and make sure that companies don't start laying off people too quickly. And whenever I have people suggest that to me, I said, yes, that would be optimal. But, Silicon Valley is famous for laying off up to 10% of its workforce per year, sometimes 12% per year. And so it's not really, I don't think that it's a realistic, even if it would be ideal, it would be realistic because, again, if your competitor is going to start laying people off with workforce transformations, you have to if you want to remain competitive. And because the AI regulations, as I mentioned, are more reactive than proactive, I suspect that it's going to be relatively painful for some people sooner rather than later. Now, it's not going to happen all at once, I don't think. There are certain types of jobs, there are certain types of industries that are more vulnerable than others. For instance, marketing, copywriting in particular, we're already seeing in the freelancer space, the number of jobs for freelance writers and copywriters and marketers has gone way down. And I've even talked to other entrepreneurs whose clients are saying, hey, we're going to let you go soon. We're doing everything that you're doing, but we're going to do it with AI. Now, we've seen this kind of thing happen before, for instance, with offshoring. During the late 90s and early 2000s, there was a huge rush to offshore as much as you could to, say, for instance, India. But after a while, we realized there was limitations with that paradigm. And so now onshoring is a thing. Likewise, there's probably going to be an overcorrection where some people kind of go all in on AI and then find there are some limitations where it's just better to keep a human in the loop. And then they dial it back and hire some people back. These kinds of things happen as natural experiments emerge. But then in terms of internal governance, the way that some of the guidance that we've gotten from the government, and this very closely parallels with kind of what I've been saying for a while, is basically you appoint a chief AI officer. This is kind of what Biden's executive order from, what was it, last November, I think, basically said that like all government departments need to have some head honcho who's responsible for AI strategy. And so by hiring someone or appointing someone internally who is responsible, who's going to be your AI czar in terms of safety, ethics, innovation, or whatever, that's going to be kind of the way to go forward. Now, one thing that has been interesting that I've heard rumors of out there is that there are many innovation officers, CIOs, chief innovation officers, that are still kind of overwhelmed by AI. And some of them kind of have their head in the sand where they don't really believe it's a thing, or they're taking a wait and see approach. But those companies that are a little more forward thinking and already hiring a VP or executive VP of AI, they're going to be doing better. So one of my biggest clients as a AI consultant, they had this exact problem about 6 months ago, where they were looking for someone to head up their AI efforts. And after interviewing for a few months, they couldn't find anyone. And so they said, well, what do we do? And I said, if you have someone internally, you look for someone who is hungry for this, who eats, sleeps, and breathes it, because there's no substitute for passion. So you hire for personality and then promote them. And that client has actually done really well. And their new head of AI, I still talk with them pretty much every other week. And they're very happy. They're so incredibly happy to be at the cutting edge of this. And they're constantly asking me the same kind of questions that you're asking, which is, how do we do this safely? What are the competitors doing? How do we stay at the cutting edge? And I think to kind of what you implied a little bit ago was we should expect some companies to go the way of the dinosaurs. Some of this is going to be structural, where the business model is just completely invalidated. In other cases, it's going to be failure to adapt. At the same time, there's going to be brand new companies up and coming that are AI first.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, the whole idea, I think, David, at this point, AI is not going anywhere, right? So, I mean, organizations need to really start understanding what it is, where it's heading. You talked about a CIO, Chief Innovative Officer. And I think now is certainly the time to start thinking about that, right? And I think those organizations that think they may be not have to worry about AI or what's in the near future, I think they're probably not quite understanding what's coming.